All right, looks like we're going to get started. My name is Jeff Hughes with Bright House Financial. These guys, if you're a sponsor, they have to make you a moderator, so we're going to see how this goes. I'm very, very excited about today's conversation entitled One Platform at a Time. I'm joined by Greg Mazza, who's Director of Platform Sales, AI, and Analytics for DMI, and then Ian Campos, Executive Vice President at Capgemini. And we're here to talk about sort of platform and ecosystems within the insurance industry, and I'm really interested in this topic because at Bright House, we sort of have spent the last several years, for those of you who don't know, we were born in 2017 as a divestiture from MetLife, the retail life and annuities business. And as a company, we have spent the better part of 5 years sort of extricating ourselves from various systems and applications and infrastructure and standing up our own environment. And while I think we've been successful in that transition to a cloud-based, software as a service-based environment, I'm incredibly interested in perspectives on how to undertake those transitions effectively, as well as where the value is going to come from. So with that, I'd like to give both Greg and Ian the opportunity to introduce themselves, as well as maybe say just a couple words on what you feel the trends in this space are. There's a lot of discussion around platforms, a lot of discussion around ecosystems. So what do you see as sort of the most compelling trends sort of near and midterm? Greg, we'll start with you.
So thanks, Jeff. So I came to Charlotte about 6 years ago and joined MetLife Direct as head of strategy, innovation, and governance, as MetLife was looking to do a digital life business. So that's how I got from Minnesota to Charlotte. We were successful in developing that platform, and then after a little while, MetLife pivoted on some of their strategy and decided to exit that business. But since then, I've been working in a number of digital insurance areas with one particular startup, which is going to be embedded insurance for P&C, and then with DMI on some different AI-based digital platforms that really have good applicability to insurance. But just real quick before I turn it over to Ian, is when we first started talking about this topic, we had totally different perspectives on what digital meant. So I think that's how we got to one platform. What does digital mean? And I think when you look at the insurance space, there are a wide variety of definitions of digital. So I hope we're going to get into that a little bit here.
Absolutely. I think it's time well spent if we can get to a single, all-encompassing definition of digital before we end up. Ian?
So thank you for being here. I was expecting 102 degrees today, but we got 102 buckets of rain instead, but we'll take it. So that's Charlotte for you. I've been in Charlotte since 2001. I moved here from Sydney, Australia, and I confused everybody. I grew up in India with my name and my mixed up accent. People don't know where I come from. I'm still figuring it out. But I've been with Capgemini for about 24 years, and I'd say equally my career has been it's all predominantly financial services, but about half of it in banking, capital markets, predominantly retail banking, and then half of it in insurance. I lead the financial services domain-based practices, so banking, capital markets, insurance, and within Capgemini, we kind of started up the insurance practice back in 2007 with your former employer, I guess, at CNA, working with a product called Guidewire, and very much in the core transformation space. So to me, I cover everything from as east as Sydney, Australia, to as west as Honolulu, Hawaii, and to really have the opportunity to meet with a lot of different clients, work with a lot of different clients, really see some trends across the board. And deeply at heart a practitioner, spent a lot of time in actually implementing core transformations. So it's really about bringing people, process, technology, platforms together. To your point around, I think, emerging trends or compelling trends, I think there's one that is emerging and very relevant to what we are doing these days, and I think the pandemic certainly accelerated it. And I like to call it kind of the digital core mindset. right? Which is, so hopefully you get to a definition of digital, but to me, digital really is as much of a mindset as it is a set of technologies in that sense. And when we talk about digital core mindset, we really, it encompasses four major things for me. First and foremost, more and more today, experience is the product. Data is the differentiator, or rather, I should say, the insights derived from data are the differentiators. Transformation is the new normal, right? So we talk about transformation, but to me, really, it's business as usual. It's a way of life today, and the pandemic certainly, brought that into sharp focus. And then, last but not the least, the core is the heart. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is there's no silver bullet. You can implement a core platform, and as modern as it gets, but it's not the silver bullet. And so it is very much an ecosystem play today, but the core really needs to be the heart of that and very much orchestrate a lot of it. So to me, bringing all of those together, I think, and I'm glad to see a lot of the insurance carriers out there, both P&C and life, are beginning to adopt this mindset. And a lot of it, I think, has been, the catalyst for this has been the way the Insurtechs have kind of gone out there and approached it. They've always seen as, something on the side. You guys don't have scale. It's the age-old battle of do the disruptors have scale before the incumbents learn to innovate? And I think more and more, it's not a zero-sum game, us versus them. It's very much a ecosystem play. So to me, I think the long answer to a very simple question is this is the emerging trend, and it's that mindset, I think, that drives everything else from a business perspective. So, hopefully.
One of the, I guess I'd like both of your perspectives on it. I'll start with you, is the source of value from these transformations. So in a number, especially I'd argue in the insurance space, a number of these platform transitions sort of were predicated upon removing constraints, process constraints, technology constraints, modernization. But you mentioned sort of this notion of experience being the product. So there is a growing, well beyond emerging sort of sense of the customer experience is sort of, that's how you and why you would take on these transformations. So I don't know if Ian, maybe you could start with kind of your sense of the value of these transformations. What do companies gain to benefit from them?
Look, I mean, I like to always think about any carriers, and you can apply this to claims and it applies it to underwriting. They're always trying to look at balancing things across three pivot points, so to speak. One is experience, and by experience, it's your insured, it's your claimant, it's your agent broker, it's your partners, and then also most importantly, your employee experience. And again, I think in the pandemic, that came into sharpened focus when everybody had to go remote. How do we actually get work done and deliver that experience that we are talking about at the front lines? Then there's what I would call the effectiveness, right? So this is the effectiveness of your operations. How well do I understand my risk? How well do I quantify it? How well do I price for it? And should I even take it on? So that's kind of the effectiveness dimension to it. And then the efficiency, right? Which is very about how quickly can we get things done. And it's very much about the process and getting to the outcome. So that total outcome is where the value is. And I don't think it is, when you talk about there's a difference between replacing legacy and building a future. And I think that's the balance that clients need to strike. And the value really lies in understanding how best to optimize it, right? So, and to me, that really has to bring the business very much into the conversation. I argue today technology is not a catalyst for business transformation. It is the business. And so therefore, it's incumbent on our business to understand these platforms, and it's incumbent upon our technologists to truly understand the business. And the value to me really is bringing all these pieces together and figuring out, what your point of departure is, what your point of arrival needs to be, and bringing a degree of pragmatism to that. We've dealt with blue sky thinkers out there. We're completely divorced from the realities on the ground, and then we've dealt with folks that can't necessarily look beyond and try to rebuild legacy in the new world, and you've kind of defeated the purpose of the reason you started this journey for. So to me, the value really comes back down to distilling it to what exactly you're trying to do around experience, effectiveness, efficiency, finding that sweet spot, and it'll be different for different clients. It's going to be different for different segments of your business, and it's going to be different for different functions. But really understanding that and bringing it together is what I would think about.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on that. I think that's right on, even now. And if I think back to our original strategy at Met, or Met Direct, we looked at the landscape of the industry, what the issues were, where the challenges were, and we came up with a simple ambition, which was make insurance easy to understand and purchase. Correct. And that guided everything we did. And you're absolutely right. In a legacy carrier, there's so many issues with legacy systems. How many acquisitions do carriers do over 20 years? You may call up to the call center and they can't find all your policies at once. You have to call 4 different numbers. So there's no discounting the difficulty with which you can implement something that's easy to understand and purchase. But that drove everything that we did. It was really the key to it.
And Greg, do you think we as an industry have gotten better at making those trade-offs, understanding sort of the combination, as well as just the practical approaches to this type of transformation? I mean, we've spent a lot of money as an industry in this area. Are we better at it today than we were 10 years ago?
Yeah, well, we're getting better at it. Not fast, but it's right. The industry sort of being dragged into it. And I never forget, when I first joined Met, I went to a LIMRA conference, and there was a fellow that was the keynote speaker from Fast Company magazine. And he said, all you legacy people in the business are not going to be able to transform the industry because your mindset isn't that. Mm-hmm. So when I think about, as we developed our strategy, thinking about, what is our reference point? Our reference point is the everyday consumer that just finishes shopping on Amazon, mm-hmm. and they have things in their cart that they looked at last time. They have, this might be an alternative, or you might also like this. So they have this phenomenal, and then they get their product oftentimes same day, mm-hmm. maybe next day if it takes a long time. And then they want to go pay their insurance bill, right? And I have a life policy like this. I cannot pay my premium online. I have to mail a check or use a third-party payment system. So I think we're being dragged into it. I think it's evolving. Another thing I saw in our innovation activity at Met was I have this view of the insurance ecosystem. So at the front end, you have these really great consumer experience companies from Silicon Valley. They know the consumer experience. They know how to make apps. They have a great experience, and they're starting to enter these different categories that have got not so great customer experiences. So they're kind of at the front end, but they have nothing. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. They have nothing behind them. Correct. They have this consumer experience that looks phenomenal, but they don't know how the rest of the ecosystem or the category works, the industry. At the far end, other end, you have the carriers who hold the paper, take the risk, but they're not really innovators in the true sense. They're really investment companies because they hold so much capital, but they're a key player in the ecosystem. And then in between, you've got the reinsurers who are actually emerging as real innovators, I think. I think there's so much activity in there. You see Munich Re and some of these others with really strong incubators. And then you move up to the MGAs and the traditional large agencies that realize, look, we're not attracting as much talent into agencies now. How do we use digital to complement that? Mm-hmm. And maybe the agents really go after the bigger clients with higher commission, but the ones that you don't want to neglect, you're not going to go sit around the kitchen table anymore, but you have a digital experience that helps them. So you have this whole end-to-end structure that are all playing against each other to rise the whole thing. So I think the pressure from consumers is driving it, but also the mm-hmm. pressure from other category entrants into the category to try to raise everything.
So you mentioned, and we talked about at the beginning, sort of this definition around digital. Ian, you offered up sort of a view that this is really a mindset. It sort of permeates the organization. Greg, I don't know if you would want to take a stab at sort of what you consider, what constitutes a digital experience. Like you mentioned, there are no shortage of definitions that are out there.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, so from my point of view, and I know Jeff's point of view is, moving from a legacy infrastructure to cloud-based provides you with a whole range of opportunities. I'm working with a startup, Cloud-Bind Insurance startup, on a API-enabled embedded auto insurance. And the idea is to embed that in the customer journey. More and more auto purchasing experiences are online or digital. There's still no easy way to buy auto insurance in that experience. There's some marketplaces, but as soon as you have a marketplace and you're comparing 2 or more policies, then there's questions. So then that leads to a phone call. So the idea is to price it really low, embed it, and what I mean by embedded is it's the whole customer journey. You can get a quote, bind the policy, get the documentation delivered to your phone or your email or to the dealer to certify you've got insurance, and then it takes you back to where you started. Because a lot of API experiences will drop you off somewhere, and it's like, where am I now? Right. So it's that whole complete digital experience that takes you back. And what we've found is only a couple carriers can support that right now, surprisingly. And it seems to be really appealing for large in-person used car dealers to start with. And what we've done is we've developed a waterfall where the standard customers that meet all the criteria will go through, and rather than declining the ones that don't meet that and having a bad customer experience, we've got a waterfall where they drop out into a substandard carrier. So we can have a really low decline rate and good pricing for everybody and still maintain that embedded experience.
Well, Ian, when you speak with clients, advise clients on this sort of digital transition and the role of platforms and ecosystems as part of that, what do you see as sort of the biggest barrier that they face? And I would say let's sort of, large carriers with sort of a number of policyholders. What prevents them from getting the value out of these transitions that they should?
I think as I answer that, I just could probably share my vantage point. I tend to deal with the large carriers and global carriers, and so I say tier 1, tier 2. That having been said, we've also dealt with startups, and it's a very, very different mindset and a very different way they approach things from. And I think a lot of it has come together in many ways. But I think the biggest barrier, regardless whether it's a startup or a large carrier, I like to distill it down into something, probably an esoteric concept is what I call organizational fortitude. Right, which really means that the problem is not a technology problem. We can generally solve it. It may cost us money, it may cost us time, it may take a lot of effort, but you can generally solve things technically. The challenge is the fortitude that an organization has. And you talked about Bright House being kind of the divestiture startup mindset. It has taken you 5 years to start building out, extracting yourself, building out a platform in that sense. And so that's an example of fortitude. If you assumed you were going to do that in 6 months, you would always be behind, right? So there's obviously got to be a bit of a plan there. And in that organizational fortitude bucket, I put things like, perfection over progress. The number of times I have worked with my clients that seem to believe that everything needs to go into it. No, there's value in standing up the new asset. There's value in standing up the new modern asset. And then you can extract further value through continuous improvement, or the transformation is the new normal piece, right? So I think there's a tendency that needs to come, you need to get away from. The other one I think is, I talked about, repaving the cow path or replacing legacy and building it in the new world. You've got to have somebody that says, no, we're not doing that. We are building around a core platform, which in many cases today is commercially off the shelf, that you're configuring for yourselves. And then I think the important thing is to understand, look at that entire value chain end to end. And I think this is the biggest challenge I've had with when we work with startups. They address a small part of that value chain. And they don't necessarily have the data that is required for it to actually prove it works out. So I think this is where, to me, more and more, that it is recognizing what the core platform can do for you, whether it's your legacy or it's a new one that you build out. That's where your core processing is, and the intent of those platforms is processing. But then also looking to see where you can get third-party Insurtechs or third-party players that can ingest either data or capability into that processing life cycle. So I think, again, it comes back to that organizational fortitude. And last but not the least, I think we live in a world where we talk about agile, the mindset's got to be agile, everything, people confuse agility with speed. And speed, to me, is scalar. You can have speed, but if you have no direction, which is velocity with the vector, I think that's the key part of it. So to me, I think that organizational fortitude, I put a lot of these things together. It generally is not technology. We can solve that. It may cost us a lot of money, but what you really got to do is when you take some of these journeys, they are, whether it's in the life of a startup, 1 year is a long term. In the life of a large carrier, 7 years is a longer period of time. But what you're dealing with should define what that period of time really is. So to me, that fortitude is the biggest barrier there.
So maybe if we could spend a little bit of time with both of you just on, we're at the Generations Conference, a lot of focus obviously on Insurtechs and FinTechs, and maybe if you both could offer some perspective around the role that you see those types of companies playing with insurers. Where have they been most successful? Where have they tended to lag? Where is the innovation that they bring to the carrier space helpful? What have you seen over the last couple of years?
Well, I love your comment about fortitude, and I think that is such a key to have. I mean, you need that evangelist within the company, but we used to joke a little bit that when an innovator pops up, like an organization is like an organism a little bit. So when an innovation would pop up, antibodies would form and reject it from the organism a little bit. But having that fortitude, I guess the question I would have, and you're probably seeing this certainly more than I am, is what is the mindset? I think you have to have a mindset within a bigger organization to be open to bringing in, I don't know if you call them widgets or expertise of other startups and innovators that can contribute to your overall goal and objective in a way that, like you said, you can try it out and see if it works, and then you can scale. So maybe you bring them in, maybe it ends up being an acquisition. But what I found in many places is you come up with something, you present it to them like, that's a great idea. We can do that ourselves because we have 30,000 people in IT. Yeah, you can do it yourself, but when will it happen? And then what other things will you be distracted with on that journey? So I think that's really important. I was at an auto conference last week for my company DMI, and we're presenting this mobile digital inspection platform that can be used for claims and damage detection on autos. And what I found was exactly that. I had startups coming to us saying, hey, we have this piece or that piece. Maybe we could partner up and integrate. We'll give you, we'll integrate our tech with each other, and the net result will be a stronger overall something. But then we have the additional benefit of distribution that already exists between us. So you get this sort of multifaceted benefit as well.
Okay.
And I think these small startups, some things that big companies could benefit is not just the tech, but maybe they're in a whole community where they grew up that is looking for innovative solutions, and maybe they're maybe MetLife is not appealing, but startup.com is appealing, and that's going to take off in a certain way.
All right.
So I think there's lots of unintended benefits that fall out of those relationships as well.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And again, it goes back to fit for purpose, right? It's not, there's no panacea out. It's no silver bullet. Startups are not the silver bullet. Insurtech's not the silver bullet. And the carriers doing it themselves is not that. I think it's really trying to understand what you're trying to do. So for example, I often throw this out to clients when we talk about it, say, can you launch a pet insurance business as a carrier in 6 months? And you look at the legacy systems we've got out there, chances are no. Can you enable a telematics-based product out there targeting young drivers? Chances are you can, but it takes a lot of effort, and it may take you three years to do it because of the constraints of legacy. So I think, at the same time, if you go out there and you look at some of the insurtechs and the startups, what I love about them is the passion, the energy they bring to it. And in many cases, they don't know what they don't know, and therefore they're not scared. And they take that first step, they'll take that plunge. And I think they bring that. It's an intangible, but they bring that to the table. And where we found, when I've taken some of these examples, is carriers have successfully been able to do some of that by stitching together a number of different insurtechs. And again, like I said, capabilities as well as data, and bringing that together, and it's stitching it together using, many cases, low-code platforms to do that, to launch these businesses quickly enough. Which then use almost your core and legacy systems as booking engines, but all the the interaction and the processing is done in there. So to me, I think it's the world is coming together in many ways. I think the insurtechs and the startups are realizing scale matters. This is a business of scale, and I think the incumbents have realized that innovation does matter too. And if we don't do it and don't do it quickly enough, they are going to find scale, or somebody will acquire them with the scale, and therefore, it's best that we learn and bring some of these together.
Okay. Yeah. I did want to note, we wanted to leave just a few minutes at the end if there were questions from folks out in the audience, so if there's any that you wanted to ask. Maybe before doing that, Ian, this notion of sort of stitching together Insurtech. So a lot of carriers have taken direct investments in those companies, right? And they create these portfolios, and so it's not just leveraging the product, but you're now sort of committed as part of the investment group to grow and support the product. Is that still, from your vantage point, both of your vantage points, is that still was it a successful strategy? Is it still a successful strategy? Or can you just simply create the ecosystem to use the product without the direct investment?
To me, I think the jury is still out on that a little bit. But I think people have learned, that you really do need to do your due diligence and truly vet. And in many cases, that means really opening up and bringing these startups into your world and into your ecosystem, so you can truly understand what is real, what is visionary, and how do we actually make it work for us. So I think. A lot of them have venture companies, and I think there are some that have done it better than others. All our clients, I'm not going to get names, but I don't think it's being looked at too much as, is this a financially going to be successful for us? But it's really about, what are the capabilities they've got here? What is the mindset they've got here? And what can we actually learn from it? So in a sense, can I use a startup to be the catalyst for my broader transformation? Yeah. I think Esure, Allstate's kind of a good example of the different business models. Insurance, I should say, sorry. But it was Bond Digital, owned by Allstate, which is the biggest of the biggest that you will get. And I think they learn a lot from each other, and I think that is what we're seeing. So I think the model of investing not just for financial outcome, but really for capability and being catalysts is where I'm seeing it work.
Yeah. I've found, just building on that a little bit, I found working on the startup side, have had multiple conversations with startups. They have a really great idea, and I said, you should go talk to big company A, B, or C, and they say, well, they're going to steal my idea. And I think it's up to the large companies to help assure them they can steal their idea because they have massive capabilities and resources. I mean, on one hand they can, on the other hand they can't do it because they don't have the right mindset, they don't move that quickly. So helping those startups to feel more comfortable trying to introduce ideas and solutions to bigger companies, I think is something we all have to encourage as well.
Good. I don't know if we had there's lights, any questions out there? Oh, great.
I don't see anybody.
Is
I'll ask a question, hey Dan. So I actually worked in MetDirect also, and so one of the things that we always joke about is insurance moves so slow. What happens if we have to get there? So how can we close that gap and get there and really meet customers where they are and what they expect, right, online and in a digital economy? But what happens, right? We've seen the big conglomerates go away because they didn't think they could. What's the outcome?
You're closer to Matt.
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? I think it's the fortitude. And, you can call it fortitude in a big company, but I think what I tell startups is, they're like, what's the key? How do I get there? And it's persistence. Persistence and fortitude, I think, are interrelated very closely. And it's like, you just can't give up. And you have to have, the champion and the evangelist to help you along the way. Because it's not going to, what we're talking about is very difficult because and you said it at the beginning, it's not so much the tech and the capabilities and putting the pieces and the wires together, it's the mindset of it, really. And even, like we said earlier too, how are we progressing? I think we're progressing because other industry categories have forced it. And I mentioned just a little bit that we're working on an embedded platform for auto. Think about, no offense to anybody here, but think about two of the worst consumer experience categories, auto and insurance, together, right? What an experience that can be. It takes on average 4 hours to buy a car, 45 minutes of which in some cases is the insurance part or the F&I part. It's like, let me out of here, I want my car, I paid, here's the check, right? You can't even do it that way. So I think other categories are forcing the transformation that we're talking about.
I might, Ian, maybe sort of give you the last word. We've talked a lot about sort of these large, enterprise scale platform transformations. We've also talked about the role of startups, insurtechs, fintechs. I'm sort of taking from the conversation that this is a sort of collaboration across those two sort of types of organizations, carriers and insurtechs, versus what I suppose could be, look, this whole industry is going to get disrupted by it and the carriers are going away. I haven't heard that conversation. I guess just to maybe get your thoughts on that.
I might be the heretic, but I think it's a confluence, and a lot of what we're talking about really is about mindset. It's about skill set. It's about data set. It's about tool set. And I think when you think of what it takes, I don't believe one survives without the other. It's not a zero-sum game to me. It is actually very much how do we put the two parts together to get to the outcomes that we're talking about from a experience being the product quickly. And I think there's a lot that you learn from each other. And then to me, the insurtechs bring that mindset. They bring that skill set, and the incumbents have enough capital to buy whatever tool set they want, right. And in many cases they own them all. Right. But it's really about ultimately that data set, and that does sit with with the carrier that has scale initially, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, if you bring all those four pieces together, it is an ecosystem play, it is a platform play, and it is at the end of the day an openness play, right? So
Yeah.
there's plenty for everybody.
Yeah, just if I could just make one really quick comment on that. An example is MetLife and Swiss Re were partners. Swiss Re was doing some reinsurance for Met. But then Swiss Re started innovating and started going direct to market. So they were a partner on reinsurance with the carrier, but also a competitor in the market. So balancing that, I think, is going to be important too. But we said it earlier. I think the reinsurers are really taking the lead in the innovation. The carriers absolutely will exist because they're just so massive, and the industry is still so capital intensive that it's not. I mean, you just can't jump in.
Right. Okay.
Tomorrow.
Well, I want to thank you both for the time today. Really enjoyed the conversation. I got a lot out of it personally, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I think there's a small break before the next session. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Again, Jeff.